All right, here we are.
Here we are.
I'm here with Arona. She is the founder of TrainingCQ, company helping organizations enter new markets. Arona, you and I met recently on the subject of my business.
We did.
I'm, completely in the United States at this time, as you know, reside in Southern Nevada, and have an interest in expanding to other markets, of which I have very little experience doing so, and frankly have not achieved success in that department yet. But I got a lot of value out of the time we spent together on the subject. I thought that others would do the same. So let's talk about that. I am the owner of a digital agency in the United States, very eager to begin in other areas. Why does somebody need Arona? Why does somebody need TrainingCQ? Why, as a, let's say, relatively well-traveled individual as I am, can't I just wing it and see what happens?
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on this podcast. It was great working with you. And it was great to see that I could take you from this local mindset to a more global mindset. And to answer your question, it's what we tell our clients. When you visit a certain place, it's not the same as doing business in that place. And even though we all speak English, right? That's the global business language of today. It doesn't mean that we understand the values that drive the behavior. So decision-making, negotiations, communication, how that person thinks in terms of business, what he wants to gain out of that business transaction might not be the same as what your mindset is about it. So when we visit a place, like you said, you're well-traveled, you visited different countries. So when you visit a place, you see a lot of the visible signs, right? You see what people eat and how they dress and the music they listen to. And maybe you can even see some human interaction between people. Does that mean that when you return to do business with stakeholders in that specific country, that you really know how to do that?
I think the answer is no.
Okay.
I think the answer is no. I think that, I've brushed the surface, right? I have an idea. Again, like I like to think of myself as aware,
Okay.
I see, these people are interacting in this particular way.
Right.
I should probably do the same. But I get it. That's on the surface, right? We're scratching the surface
That's
here barely.
Yes.
Very, very point well made.
Okay.
So what does one do in this case?
So let's talk about communication, because since that really is the cornerstone of how all human beings interact, and if we're talking about business interactions, we need to understand how one communicates. First of all, what is their cultural mindset when one communicates? How does that transcend into another culture? Does it transcend into another culture? And let me ask you, do you consider yourself a direct or indirect communicator?
It's
hard to answer since you don't know what direct and indirect is, but
I think,
just for go with it.
I think I have an understanding of I have my own idea of what those two things mean. I'm not certain, but I like to think of myself as a person that gets to the point quickly.
Okay.
I appreciate brevity, and I appreciate conciseness. And as I'm saying these words, I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is the opposite of what one might want in a different location, right? A different place.
Okay.
So let's say direct. I'm direct.
Okay, so you're direct.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to tell you a story of a client of ours, and you'll see how this plays out.
Okay.
So an American, a client of ours, went on a business trip to China. And as part of being the first time in Shanghai, he thought he would take a day off from business and tour the city. So he joined one of those tour buses. And the driver was driving really fast, actually too fast for his comfort level. So he approached the driver. He went up to the driver and he said, "Could you please slow it down?" The driver looked at him, pressed on the gas pedal, and drove even faster. Any idea why before I tell you?
I mean, my first reaction, the guy's an a-hole. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so there's a cultural answer, a more politically correct answer.
Yeah.
There are two elements, actually, to this answer. The first one being that in China, one of the intrinsic values, not just China, but Asian countries on the whole, and some other cultures as well, but in China, one of the intrinsic basic values is what we call saving face, or the opposite of it, losing face, which means that in a communication in any kind of an interaction, whether it's business or personal, one doesn't want to cause the other one to lose face, meaning to embarrass them or to humiliate them. So the American having a very direct communication style, if he would have done this in America, it would have been very clearly understood.
Sure.
He felt uncomfortable. He wanted the driver to slow down.
Makes sense to me.
Not a problem,
Yeah.
right? But the Chinese bus driver understood exactly the opposite. He felt that the American didn't trust his driving, and to show that he is a capable driver,
He's going to go faster.
He's going to go faster.
Yeah. Interesting.
So what he needed to do is what somebody on the bus, he told us this story later, and what somebody on the bus explained to him is that communication, which is the second element. The first one was saving face. The second one was communication. He was too direct, and he basically insulted out of this saving face thing.
Yep.
He insulted the driver. And in cultures that are very indirect, your communication cannot be so direct. So what he should have done, and what he did do after getting some advice from one of the other tourists, he went back up to the driver and he said, you know, Shanghai is really beautiful, but when you drive so fast, I have a really hard time seeing all the great things that your city offers. You're laughing.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what he should have done.
No, I get
and
it.
The driver got it, and that's how he slowed down. So when we communicate with cultures that are different from us, what we need to understand is that our way of talking and understanding context might be totally different. And I'm going to add another layer to this. I said before that English is the common business language, right? But do we all understand each other? Because language itself is also rooted in culture. So let me give you an example. Let's do some role playing here. We're both work in a corporate America, okay? Let's say, and I'm your manager, and you work for me, and I come up to you and I say, Alex, I need this as soon as possible. By when will I get it in your cultural mindset?
Yeah.
Okay.
What would I say?
What would you say? I mean, what would your perception of as soon as possible mean?
It would mean as soon as I can finish the job in a correct fashion.
Okay. Would it be accurate to say that you would try to do it as your first priority since somebody said, I need this as soon as possible?
Yes.
Right? Okay, whether it's the same day or the next day, but it would be somewhere in your top priority,
Agreed.
right?
Yep.
Now, that same situation, if I take that to a South American company or one of the Arab cultures, South American or Arab cultures, they get it. They hear, I need this as soon as possible. But context differs here. And their understanding is, I get that it's important, but I have other priorities and I have other responsibilities.
Is that so? Even though you clearly said...
Yes. As soon as possible can mean 3 days later. For them, it's as soon as possible.
I see.
So language also has a different context when we talk about communication.
Very interesting. Yes. Very interesting. And as you were explaining to me the situation in the on the bus, I'm just thinking how it could be amplified in a business situation. And let's say I had an opportunity and I had gone to this location. And let's say that I had been picked up by, I don't know, the owner of a particular group that for some reason wanted to work with me and me only. I wonder if I made a mistake that seems very minor and commented on his driving. Because for whatever reason, I was nervous, didn't feel well, whatever it was, didn't approach it the right way. I could screw up the whole thing, potentially.
Yes, you
right?
could. You could. We worked with an organization that was based in Israel, wanted to do business in Singapore, a retail-oriented business. And the marketing director went to Singapore, and they had this whole conference table, in Asian cultures. It isn't just the CEO who comes to negotiate. It's the whole entourage, okay? And so the Israeli thought, as he came in a day early before the meeting, and so he said, I'm going to go check out the retail stores of this organization that I'm going to do business with. And he went into the stores and he checked it out, and the next day comes and they're negotiating and everything's moving towards closing this business transaction. And then the Israeli marketing director, said, "You guys, I visited some of your stores yesterday, and I saw that the way the merchandise was displayed is not conducive to your sales. Once you buy our product, it will raise the way you're displayed and your ROI and so forth and so on." If you would have done this America to America, right, it wouldn't have been an issue, right? You would have said, "I get it. Okay,
Yes.
it's a sales pitch. It's fine. Let's move on." At that moment, he had no idea because he wasn't really mindful of the Singaporean culture. The meeting continued. They even took him out to lunch.
But it was dead.
It was dead.
He
He went back to Israel. He was already counting his end of the year bonus. And they totally ghosted him. They didn't answer his emails. And he had no idea until we explained to him, you caused the CEO in front of his whole...
Because the CEO is the one that probably made, he at least approved things to be the way that they were, and it's insulting to them to come in that way.
It's insulting that he lost face in front of his employees.
Yeah.
That was the main point.
I get it.
So it can be a deal breaker. It can really be a deal breaker because in their eyes, they actually lost trust in who you are as a person. And when you do business with cultures that are less transactional, like, most of Western European cultures and US and Canada are very transactional in their way of doing business, meaning you're not looking to build relationships, you are looking to close a deal. If a relationship comes out of that, that's fine.
Great.
But it's not
the primary driver.
It's not the primary drive. But in cultures like this, you don't do business with the company. You can have somebody from Google come and sell whatever. If there's no interpersonal dynamics of building trust, it doesn't matter what company you represent.
Interesting.
So it's very, very different.
So how should have this Israeli gentleman approached the situation?
First of all, he shouldn't have said anything derogatory or negative about the way the merchandise was displayed.
Yeah.
And he should have just gone with the flow and understood the dynamics of the culture. And also been mindful that in Singaporean culture, which is actually part of a Chinese culture, you have to be very aware of keeping the respect of, the person that you're negotiating with. You cannot say anything that is conceived critical. You can, but in a very roundabout way. And he could have said something else. What do you think he could have said about the stores that he visited?
You did a great job, and I think by using my product, it's only going to, help even more. Maybe, right?
Right.
Yeah? Something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that would have saved the face.
I have this playing in my mind now. It seems, first of all, I get it. There's so much to take into account, but it also seems quite really difficult. Like I have to take all these things into consideration. And I could be doing myself a big disservice if I don't. Frankly, it makes clear the reason why expertise is needed in all of this, right?
I'll tell you what it is. It's the further we go from our comfort zone of how we do business and how we negotiate and how we communicate requires us kind of to flex out of that comfort zone. How much flexing? Very individual. If you have prior business knowledge of that culture or country or region, you might have to flex a little bit. Somebody else who's, let's say, never been to China, might have to do a lot of flexing to understand what are the do's and don'ts. But it isn't just about do's and don'ts. It's understanding the values of that culture because the values, they drive the behavior. So if I understand, let's say, the saving phase or this indirect communication, there is a purpose to indirect communication. It's maintaining harmony. It's avoiding conflict. Things that are less apparent in cultures who are much more direct. I'll give you another example. We work a lot with organizations who have tech people in India. Okay? India is another one of those saving face, indirect communication cultures. And when you have a manager from a Western kind of an organization with a very direct or fairly direct communication style, managing an Indian team leader and very directly asking, can I have this ready by Monday? Okay, in a Western culture, you would say either yes or you would say no, or
Yep.
you would say, no, I can't do it Monday, but I'll have it to you by Wednesday.
Yes, it's
okay?
unreasonable Monday. I'll have it on Wednesday, whenever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
But in cultures like that, that person isn't going to say, no, I can't have it to you by Monday, because he will cause you, his employer, to lose face. So the answer will automatically be yes. Okay, never mind that he knows that he can't deliver on Monday. So now here you have this direct communication manager from some Western organization thinking that it's going to be in his email come Monday morning.
Yeah.
Guess what? It ain't going to be there Monday morning.
But isn't the guy thinking he's going to look bad on Monday if he doesn't deliver it? Like, I don't.
No, because in their culture, saying no, by the way, there is not a no in indirect communication cultures. There is a way of saying, so if the Western manager would have been in tune and understanding the culture, he would have probably heard something like, let me check with my team. This might be challenging. I might need another aspect of this product to complete it, whatever it is. There would have been some kind of a communication that would have been interpreted as, no, I can't do it on Monday.
He's just not going to say no.
He's not going to say no.
Yeah.
And there's another layer of culture coming into play here, which is hierarchy. So in cultures like that, there is hierarchy. And if you, for say, are the Western manager, you are actually on a ladder, you're higher than him, so he can't say no to you because he's going to cause you to lose face.
I see.
So what you need to do is you need to learn the cultural communication nuances, which means that you actually need to listen not to what is being said, but to what is not being said. The in-between. That's where the truth is. That's where the intent is.
It's that, and it's also phrasing the questions in an appropriate fashion so that I don't put that person in a bad position.
Exactly. So how would you say to this Indian tech guy, instead of saying, can I have this ready on Monday, what would you say to him?
When is the most reasonable time that I can achieve this done at a high level? Right? Not done in a half measure, done completely.
Because then he can't say yes or no.
Yeah.
He has to give you a time frame, right?
Yeah.
And that would be an accurate time frame on his side, and you'll have that whenever that'll be, right?
Yes.
So there is this whole communication thing. There is, I learned in my undergraduate program, I studied communication. So there is the sender of the message, right? There's the receiver of the message, and then in the middle you have the message, right? But in cross-cultural interactions, there's static, or what we call background noise, because the context changes. So you need to understand who you're talking to and what that person is actually saying to you and what he's not saying to you, that you need to understand between the lines. And that requires experience, knowledge, and training.
It makes perfect sense to me, and I'll admit, I'm not sure I ever really took any of this into account, frankly. I consider myself, let's call it with air quotes here, good at what I do, in the sense of I have a conversation with somebody, I understand the issues, I listen to what the issues are, I say, here's the way I'm going to fix your problem, if I can, right? But I'll admit, I have never taken
and you're not the only
anything from here into account.
And you're not the only one. Most of us go into a cross-cultural business interaction with our values, our way of talking, our way of thinking, believing that how we do it at home transcends into another culture. But they have their own set of values. And what we consider as common sense, that is the biggest myth, by the way, common sense. What we consider as common sense might be totally different in another culture.
Interesting.
So,
but look, there's lessons to be gleaned from this, not just me going overseas somewhere. I mean, there are millions of different people here, and how I interact with them here also could be maybe not to the degree of which going into another country, another whole situation. But again, in speaking with you now, I think that it's a good opportunity to do some thinking and say, how can I ensure that the words coming out of my mouth are the best possible ones for what I'm trying to achieve here. Because at the end of the day, at least I can speak for myself here. I want to, I have a couple of responsibilities. I have a responsibility to my organization to be a good steward of its resources,
right?
To be the salesperson, right, and bring in new
For
revenues
sure.
to the business. But I also have a responsibility to do what's right for my client and to understand the goal that they're trying to achieve and know whether I'm the right person to get them there or not.
Absolutely.
And introspection is necessary after conversations like this in order to say, what opportunities are there for me to say, maybe my direct or very direct approach, maybe that might not be the best thing in all cases.
Or maybe
Yeah.
in all cases and depending on what culture. And you're bringing up another layer of difficulty when we talk about culture, and that is that at the end of the day, we're individuals. So you might be American and I might be something else, and we have our kind of a national cultural characteristics, right? Americans are considered direct communicators and, transactional, and business outcomes are very important. The faster we get to them, the better.
Sounds all correct. Yeah.
But within the 250 million people that are in America, everybody has their own, we call them the cultural DNA. So let's say, for example, somebody who's American, but he's been raised in, I don't know, another country somewhere that the culture is very different. And then he went to university, let's say in Europe. And then he works for some investment company in London. And now he's coming back to the United States. He'll have adapted into that basket of his DNA different cultural characteristics. So is he a purebred American? Yes, maybe his passport is.
Yeah.
But he has other cultural characteristics.
Makes sense.
So you have to be, so it makes it more difficult because it isn't just, okay, I'm going to go to China. I had training with Arona. I now get how the Chinese people think and negotiate. But at the end of the day, I need to feel the person and see where is this person coming from, because not all Chinese are the same. Like not all Americans are the same.
Very interesting.
So that makes it even a bit more challenging. And the idea here really is what we call to work from a global mindset. We're all going to make mistakes. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I still sometimes make mistakes. The advantage that I have over somebody who doesn't work from a global mindset is that I am aware in real time when I'm making a cultural faux pas, and I kind of know how to dance myself out of the situation, as opposed to somebody else who is clueless.
Has no idea, and they thought they made the sale. They went home, they started to count the money, like you said.
Exactly, and they'll go back making the same mistake somewhere else.
And wonder why it's not going well.
So it's really learning to look at things from a global mindset. First of all, to understand how you do business, what is the way you make decisions, how do you negotiate? Like negotiations, that's also tied into communication. There are different cultures that negotiate very differently from the way Americans negotiate, okay? So if you go into a culture like UAE, which is a quite win-lose kind of a negotiation strategy, and you go in with your win-win strategy and you put everything out there on the table, or most of it out there on the table, you're going to lose already in the first round. So there's a lot of tactics in understanding how people interact in different cultures. And at the end of the day, culture impacts every single business interaction that you're going to have with whoever it is when it's not in a culture that you're very familiar with. You have to be aware, mindful.
It sounds to me that, frankly, I'm at a very big negative compared to somebody else that has this kind of awareness when going into these kinds of situations.
And that's why we're working together to remedy that.
You've proven it to me that it's important and that it's absolutely necessary. So what does one do, right? They've heard you speak about this subject. What does one do that's interested in making another step, moving in the right direction?
Well, what we do is we conduct workshops in organizations that are kind of a series of workshops, depending on whatever the organization needs, depending on also what their market what their goal is. If it's more than one country, then it takes more time. But we basically take them from, first of all, we teach them awareness of their own culture and the way, they're looking at other things, values and communication, negotiation. So because none of us do that on a day-to-day. We just automatically, communicate the way we do and think the way we do and make decisions the way we do. We don't really think about it. So let's first be aware of what we represent. And then let's look at the country or the region that we want to do businesses, and let's see how far are the differences from where we're at. And that's individual too. Mm-hmm. If I have a team of 20 people, they're not going to be the same,
they're not
right?
on the same
Based
page.
on, how much experience or awareness they have. So sometimes it takes group effort and sometimes it takes one-on-one coaching to take those people from where they're at, from what we call being locally culturally knowledgeable to being globally culturally knowledgeable. So we do workshops, we do training, we do one-on-one coaching, and then we come back into the organization a few months later and we do a follow-up and we say, okay, what has worked for you well from the time we were here? What are still the blind spots? And let's work on those blind spots.
I was going to say, how does one gauge success, right? How do you gauge success after a project of that?
Well, we measure KPIs. It's hard to measure ROI, even though I think the organization is capable of measuring ROIs, but we measure KPIs. And KPIs really means I have a target culture, I have a target organization that I want to do business with.
Yep.
I have actually been able to close that business, but not only a one-time kind of a closing, I have actually managed to build a sustainable long-term relationship with that organization. And that's really what it's about. And building relationships is a whole different issue because there are cultures that it takes months to build relationships. And it isn't because in that culture they're looking for new friends. No, the building of relationship equals building trust. Mm-hmm. And if I can't trust you, then I won't do business with you. Okay, very different, by the way, from the way business is done in Western cultures, where we would meet and we'd have a 5-minute, small talk. Yes. How's the weather? And
I like you. What's the price? Is it negotiable? Can we lower it a bit?
Okay, and if you do that in relationship-oriented cultures, you'll never go further from that conversation because they don't know you. They won't do business with people they don't trust. And in most of those cultures, it's a very centralized society, which means I do business with people I know, with people I like, and with people I trust. Yeah. Now, that takes time
of course,
to build relationships. And when we come from a very transactional-oriented culture, we don't think about that. You go on a business trip 3, 4, 5 days, you expect to come back with some kind of an initial agreement, right? Some kind of a thing that, okay, this is going to go further. And sometimes it takes repeated visits, building that relationship. I've heard of an organization that it took them 2 years to close a deal with UAE, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 years. Now, it takes patience. What we always tell our clients is it's not about time, it's about timing.
I see.
So don't go forward, don't run into talking about business. You have to be mindful of when they're ready to talk business. And that can take time.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Wow. How does one get in touch with you?
We have a great website, TrainingCQ.com. I'm very strong on LinkedIn, Arona Maskil, and I advertise and I do a lot of articles based on culture that are then published in different media. So, I'm not a difficult person to get in touch with. And TrainingCQ.com.
I enjoyed it very much, and I appreciate the time you spent with me.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.